Excellent. Okay, I'm glad the recording is in progress. And let's get this, what's going on here, 1 minute, and let's get our shiur in progress. Good evening, everybody. Happy to see everybody. Thank you for joining us for our Tuesday night shiur, Parshat Hashavua. I want to acknowledge, I saw Simcha a couple minutes ago, that Simcha and his wife Nellie are sponsoring the shiur this evening in commemoration of the birthday of Nellie's father, Moshe Yinik, Zichrono Livracha. Simcha, please make sure Nellie knows that we wish her father's neshamas have an aliyah, and you and Nellie and your whole family should be blessed with long life and good health. And God willing, we should all be blessed with long life and good health. Tonight's Parshat, as you know, is Parshat Mishpatim, which literally means statutes. And the first Dvar Torah that I want to share with you tonight explores the relationship between last week's Parsha, which was Yitro, and this week's Parsha, which is Mishpatim. So, and I want to share with you as well, in exploring that relationship, a sort of insight or perspective that Rabbi Ovadia Seforno shares. And I've been sharing a lot of his ideas. I've been spending a little time this year looking more deeply into the Seforno's explanations, and sometimes he comes up with fascinating ideas. Now, this explanation is more an insight into how the events of Har Sinai unfolded. So I suspect that for many of us, for myself, last week's Parsha is Yitro, this week's Parsha is Mishpatim. And we tend to see Mishpatim obviously follows Yitro, but it follows in sort of a thematic order. So last week was Har Sinai, last week was the Seret HaDibrot, and that concluded, and that event that we describe as Matan Torah is part of Parshat Yitro's narrative. And Parshat Mishpatim's narrative is a Parsha filled with many, many halachot that govern social and human intercourse and interaction. It's the basis of so much of the Gemara's discussion of torts, damages. The whole Seder Nezikin, in some ways, is rooted very, very heavily, not exclusively, but heavily on Parshat Mishpatim, with its multiple halachot, which have a lot to do with human interaction and violations of property, of dignity, of injury, and the like. So let's just take a look again at what we know about Parshat Yitro and the Seret HaDibrot, and then see where Parshat Mishpatim begins. Now, one of the things that we know from a rabbinic perspective is their interpretation of the very beginning of this week's Parsha. So the name of the Parsha is Mishpatim, but that's not the first word in the Parsha. So if you're following in a Chumash, which you don't have to, we're looking at Perek Kaf Aleph. And the first pasuk, which is not long, I'll read it and translate it. Ve'ele ha-mishpatim asher tasim lifneihem. And these are the ordinances that you shall place before them. Ve'ele ha-mishpatim asher tasim lifneihem. These are the ordinances which you should place before them. Let's just take a look at the first word, and even more specifically at the first letter of the first word of this parsha. Ve'ele, and these. And as we've often talked about in terms of the traditional rabbinic lens, no letter is unnecessary. And so when you take a look at the first word, ve'ele, and you apply a very rigorous examination of it, can the word be written without the vav, and the meaning of the pasuk be intact? So let's try. Eile ha-mishpatim asher tasim lifneihem. These are the ordinances that you shall place before them. Seems entirely understandable. And yet the Torah insists that there's a vav, and this particular vav is called in Hebrew vav chibur. It's a conjunctive vav. It's a preposition of and, which connects. Well, why do I need the connection? If the pasuk can independently be read and understood without the vav, its presence requires us to understand why. And so Rashi quotes a rabbinic tradition found in the collection of Midrashim called the Mechilta, and this is Rashi's explanation. Kol makom shene'emar ele, every place where the word ele, these, and just the word these is written, pasalat harishonim. The purpose of the word these is, as it were, to supersede the messages which came prior to it beforehand. Eile, these, wants to focus our attention on that which is coming now, and not that which was mentioned earlier. So according to Rashi in the Mechilta, whenever you have a section of the Torah which begins with the word these, the emphasis is on what we're about to say supersedes any sort of established learning and precedent that came beforehand. Then Rashi continues, but when it says ve'ele, as it says in our Parsha, Mosif al Harishonim, that is intended, the Vav, that Vav HaChibur is a conjunctive, which means that it's intending to connect that which comes before, not to supersede, not to abrogate, but somehow to find a bridge, a connection. So the letter ve'ele right away suggests that there's some sort of connection between Parshat Yitro and Parshat Mishpatim. What the connection is not yet entirely clear. But let's just think for a second about what we do know. What we know is the Aseret HaDibrot. That was last week's. And it's important to realize, of course, the proper translation of the phrase Aseret HaDibrot is not really the 10 Commandments. That's the popular translation. The correct translation is the 10 statements, the 10 sayings. So these 10 statements, these 10 sayings, the Aseret HaDibrot, seem to represent some sort of central or essential articulation of so much of Jewish thought and philosophy. So if we know what they were about, what should Parshat Mishpatim likely be about? You would think that Parshat Mishpatim then would be about the things that Hashem says, okay, these are the central ideas. I want to explain now what I talked about. Maybe it should be about Shabbos. Maybe it should be Kibbut Av V'Ein. Like all of the mitzvot found in Parshat Mishpatim, as I mentioned before, sort of create together this notion of Jewish tort law. But is that really the central point of all of the Aseret HaDibrot? So Parshat Mishpatim somehow doesn't feel, perhaps at first glance, to be a natural follow-up to Aseret HaDibrot. But according to what we just said, in the rabbinic lens, there seems to be a follow-up. That's what the Vav is there for. So I want to explore that follow-up. And what is the nature of that Vav? What is the connection? And I want to do that through the eyes of the Seforno. But let's just go back a little bit and to review the actual sort of narrative leading up to the Aseret HaDibrot, which the Aseret HaDibrot themselves are not going to be the main part of what we're going to be doing. So Bnei Israel, of course, are now camped around Har Sinai, and Hashem calls Moshe. Vayomer Hashem el Moshe, Lech el ha'am. Hashem says to Moshe, I want you to go to the people, and I want you to help them get ready. V'kidashtam hayom u'machar. Let them sanctify themselves today and tomorrow. They should wash their clothes. V'hayun nechonim le'yom hashlishi. They should be ready for the third day. Because on the third day, Hashem is somehow going to come down, descend in front of the entire people on Har Sinai. And I want you to be very clear. I want you to, as you were, I want you to create some sort of border around the mountain. And tell them, tell the people they should not go up in the Har, they should not even touch the side of the edge of the Har. Anybody who touches even the edge of the mountain is surely going to die. Okay, so let's just skip a little bit. Vayered Moshe min har. So Moshe is on the mountain as God delivers this message to him. Moshe comes down from the mountain. Vaykadesh et ha'am vaychapsu simutam. So he passes on the message, and the people prepare themselves in a manner which Moshe instructed them. They wash their clothes. What all the other laws, they are now ready, following Moshe's instruction that he conveyed faithfully and loyally based on what Hashem told him when he was up on the mountain. Get ready and all the things. Now comes the third day, which Hashem said is going to be the day of the sort of revelation. That morning comes, there are sounds and there are thunder and lightning. This thick, heavy cloud somehow is resting on the top of the Har. The kol shofar chazak ma'od, and the sound of a shofar is getting louder and louder and louder, which of course is the exact opposite of a human blowing the shofar. We blow the shofar, it starts loud and it gets weaker as the air in our lungs depletes. That's not, of course, the shofar sound that Hashem has. The people are trembling because this is an awful moment. Moshe brings everybody, the Har out to stand around the mountain. Of course, around, they can't go up. Har Sinai, Ashan Kulo, and there is this huge cloud of smoke around Har Sinai, Aish, fire, everything. And then, Vayered Hashem al Har Sinai al Rosh Har. So now Hashem descends on Har Sinai. Vayikra Hashem la Moshe al Rosh Har. Moshe. Now Hashem calls Moshe to go up the mountain. So Moshe goes up. Vayal Moshe. I'm reading now for those who want to follow. Yud Tet, Perik Yud Tet, Pasuk Kav. Vayomer Hashem al Moshe. Raid ha'am. Raid ha'ed va'am. Now Moshe's just gone up to the mountain. Moshe, I want you to go down now. Go down now. And tell the Am, I want you to tell the people, please be careful. I don't want anybody to climb the mountain. I don't want anybody to get killed. I don't want there to be mass deaths because people not paying attention to me. Make sure that everybody follows the rules. Moshe says to Hashem, Hashem, what do you want from me? I already warned everybody. Nobody's coming up. I gave everybody clear instructions. Border, we did this. We put the yellow tape around Har Sinai, police line, do not cross. We took all the precautions. You told us what to do. You gave me instructions. I've done what you've done, what you said. Well, Yomer love Hashem. Hashem says to him, Moshe, Lech rate, go down. Va'alita atav Aaronim. I want you to go down, but you and Moshe and Aaron will come back up. But I want to be absolutely sure that the people know. Vayered Moshe el ha'am vayomer lihem. So Moshe goes down and he tells them. And then comes the Aseret HaDibrot. So just for a visual in your own minds, when Hashem speaks the 10 statements, where's Moshe standing? Is he on top of the mountain or is he with the people at the bottom? And the correct answer, based on just the story itself, is he's on the bottom. When Hashem speaks the 10 sayings, the Aseret HaDibrot, Moshe is not on Har Sinai. He's standing with everybody. So Har Sinai, now comes the Aseret HaDibrot. I'm not going to read through them. And then we get to Perik Chaf, Pasuk Tedvav, bear with me. Everybody, the nation is seeing the sounds, they're watching the show with the torches, the fire, the kol shofar. Vayar ha'am vayanu'u vayamdu me'erchok. The people are terrified. And, Hashem is worried that they're going to get closer. The Torah tells us the exact opposite happened. Out of fear, they all retreated. They backed up. They vayanu me'erchok. They did not want to get close. This was a very frightening experience for them. Vayamru Moshe, daber ata imanu v'nishma. Moshe, please, we want you to speak to us. We are so scared. We'll listen to you, but this is too overwhelming. We think we're going to die. If Hashem continues to talk to us, we think we're going to die. Please, you be our intermediary. Please. Moshe says, don't be scared. Hashem is just trying to test you. Hashem just wants to impress upon you how much you need to be mindful of his rules and his laws. He's not going to kill you. I'm assuming you don't touch the harp. So the people are standing far away, and then the Moshe nigash el ha'arafel asher sham ha'elokim. And Moshe then, according to the using now the translation interpretation from the stone, Moshe approached the thick cloud where God was. And where was God in the thick cloud? He was on Har Sinai. So according to this, Moshe now ascends Har Sinai after the Aseret HaDibrot. So let's go back. I want to read to you just a short, very short explanation in the Seforno, because I think it helps us understand that one Vav and the connection between Parshat Yitro and the whole story, the narrative Har Sinai, and Parshat Mishpatim. So, reading in Perik, I'm going to just go back to something that we talked about. It's in Perik Yotet. I'm going back to chapter 19, Pasuk Chaf Dalet. So going back to Perek Yutet Pasuk Chaf Dalet. So one more time, Hashem comes down in Har Sinai and he tells Moshe, please come up, I want to talk with you. V'yomer Hashem al Moshe, go down. So now Moshe went up, and then Hashem says, okay, now that you're here, I want you to go down, and I want you to tell the people to be very careful. They're not allowed to touch the mountain. Moshe says, they can't. You already told me, I've warned them. V'yomer elav Hashem, Hashem then says to Moshe, go down, tell them, and then Alita Atava Aharon Imach, you shall ascend and Aharon with you, but the Kohanim and the people, they shall not break through to ascend to Hashem, lest he burst forth against them. So Moshe descended to the people and said it to them. We've done that. Listen to the Sephorno's explanation on the words Ve'alita Aharon, Alita Atave Aharon. This is in chapter 19, Parshat Yitro Pasuk Chaf Dalet. And you shall come up, ascend, you and Aharon. The Sforno says, Achar Tashlum Aseret Hadibrot Uparashat Mishpatim. That's all I want to read to you. Again, I'll read a lot of those words again, then I'll translate. Achar Tashlum Aseret Hadibrot Uparashat Mishpatim. Oh, closed captioning. I have 1 minute. I apologize, and show captions. I think that's on. Let me just double check. Yes, okay, good. I apologize, and next time just remind me earlier. Sometimes I don't remember everything. Okay, so what was the point of this? What was the point of this Sephorno? The point of this Sephorno is it tells us that when did Moshe go back on Har Sinai? We know he waited till after Aseret Hadibrot, but what does Sephorno say? He didn't just wait until after Aseret Hadibrot. He waited until after Aseret Hadibrot and all of Parashat Mishpatim. In other words, when we talk about that moment of great revelation, according to Sephorno, that comes as a package. After Aseret Hadibrot and all of Parashat Mishpatim was taught, then Moshe goes up on Har Sinai and spends 40 days and 40 nights and whatever that mystical, incredible moment is. That's when it happened. So according then to this Sephorno, I really understand why Parashat Mishpatim begins with the Vav. Why? Because this Vav, when not only is it a conjunctive, it's telling me something critical about how I should understand the unfolding of the entire narrative. Parashat Mishpatim has to be connected to Parashat Yitro. Why? Because Parashat Yitro and Parashat Mishpatim make up that unit of revelation. And not like some of us thought, myself included. Parashat Yitro is the story of revelation, and then comes Parashat Mishpatim, maybe at some point in the future, and Hashem wants us to understand that the significance of all the laws governing social interaction, as is indicated in Parshat Mishpatim, are as important as Aseret Hadibrot, and that's why you have the Vav, which would be the standard explanation of what the Vav is. That Vav is here to tell us that all the laws of human interaction towards have the same divine origin as Aseret Hadibrot, which means, you take a look at Aseret Hadibrot, you think, oh, that's fundamental, that's Judaism in its core, that's the distillation of all the important ideas of Judaism. Parshat Mishpatim are details. And so there's essential and there's details. And maybe the details are also important like the essential. It's true. That's not an untrue statement. But according to the Sephorno says, it's deeper than that. It's about understanding. It's about understanding the connection between Parshat Yitro and Parshat Mishpatim. And then the Sephorno adds something which the Ramban also explains. And this I'm not going to read inside, but I'm just going to explain it to you. The point of the connection between Mishpatim and Yitro is not so clear still. I understand that they are connected. Sephorno says first there was Aseret Hadibrot and Mishpatim, but why? Why Parashat Mishpatim? What's the point of Parashat Mishpatim? So the Ramban explains, and as does the Sephorno, that you need Parashat Mishpatim to understand the Aseret HaDibrot. Which part of Aseret HaDibrot do you need to understand? So the Ramban, as well as the Seforno, suggest the very last of the Aseret HaDibrot is Lo Tachmod, do not covet. What does covet mean? Well, you should respect the fact that other people have their own boundaries, their laws. People have their possessions, the family unit, and you don't have a right to encroach on that. Lo tachmod is that notion that we have to come to understand that there are borders, there are limits to what we have access to. In other words, the Ramban says, what is Parashat Mishpatim in its entirety? In its entirety, it is the expansion of and the explanation of what Lo Tachmod entails. The last of the Aseret HaDibrot, which gives us this general notion of Lo Tachmod, do not covet. Be careful, hands off, take that step back. If you're not clear of what it is, here comes Parashat Mishpatim and says, here is a whole host of halachot, dinim, and mitzvot in the Torah, which essentially creates that sort of understanding of where you and your rights begin and end, and where another person's rights begin and end. And if you encroach, then you violate it. You violate it, as it were, one of the Aseret HaDibrot. But in order to properly fulfill it, you need to understand. And so, according to the Ramban and according to the Seforno, Parashat Mishpatim becomes, as it were, a exercise, in some ways, the Torah's own explication of its mitzvot. Hashem says, here's the mitzvah, and in order to fulfill it, you need now to understand all of this. So that's the Ramban and the Seforno on understanding the relationship between Parashat Yitro and Parashat Shoftim. Parashat Mishpatim, excuse me. So let's go back a little bit. And now we're going to take a look at some of the specifics in Parashat Mishpatim. So I'm going to take a look at starting at Perek Chav Bet. We're going to jump to Perek Chav Bet, not the very beginning of Parashat Mishpatim. So here's Perek Chav Bet, and we're going to take a look at Pasuk Chav Aleph 21. Pasuk Chav Aleph. Here is the Pasuk. Kol almana veyatom lo te'anun. Translation from Stone. You shall not cause pain to any widow or orphan. Kol almana veyatom lo te'anun. And if that wasn't enough, meaning, okay, Hashem is warning me, I guess I have to take it seriously, as all divine warnings. Hashem says, I'm going to make this even more clear. Im ane ta'ane oto, ti'im tza'ok yitzak elai, shamoa eshma tza'akato, v'chara api v'haragti etchem v'charev, v'hayu neshechem almanot, uvnechem yetomim. Wow, this is really strong. I want to read this again. You shall not cause pain to any widow or orphan. That's the original warning. If you dare to cause him pain, for if he, the exploited one, the almanah, shall cry out to me, I shall surely hear his cry. My wrath shall blaze, and I shall kill you by the sword, and your wives will be widows, and your children orphans. In other words, if you oppress the widows and the orphans, measure for measure, if that's what you do, then that will be something to be visited upon your own family. Your wives will be widows, and your children will be orphans. Well, that's pretty serious. Let's dig a little bit deeper into this. So the Rambam, Rav Moshe ben Maimon, in his Mishnah Torah, in Hilchot Deot, deals a little bit with this particular mitzvah and halacha. And in the 6th chapter of Hilchot Deot, halacha 10, well, he begins halacha 10 by saying, Chayav adam lizaher bitomim u'ba'almanot. A person has to be very careful regarding the way he treats and acts with yitomim and almanot, orphans and widows. Because these people are so low. They're depressed. They're demoralized. Their ruach is low. They are perhaps one of the most depressed parts of our community because of their situation. And then I'm skipping a lot. And I'll read something else. Lo inhag bahem minhag kol adam. It is forbidden for us to treat them, interact with them in the same way we would with anybody else. Ella ya'aseh lahem hefresh v'yinahalem b'nachat u'verachamim gedolim b'chavod. Rather, in dealing with them, we have to separate them from others and realize that there are different sets of expectations when we deal with the widow and with the orphan, and we have to deal with them b'nachat, calmly, not in an agitated manner, b'rachamim, with mercy, compassion, v'chavod, and with dignity. Shnei Amar, and he quotes a pasuk in Sefer Mishlei, which Ki go'alam chazak hu yariv et rivam, because Hashem, who is the Redeemer, will fight, as it were, on their behalf. Okay, so the Rambam requires giving orphans and widows special treatment. Given their de facto position of, I guess, social and economic inferiority and hardship, they must be treated with special affection and honor so they can overcome these feelings of inferiority. They have been specifically highlighted. So that says a lot, I think, about our understanding toward people who are in positions of great weakness and vulnerability. We, the rest of society, cannot exploit them, and God, as it were, has a special ear towards the cries of those members of society who are particularly weak and vulnerable. Staying on the same topic, I want to share with you a midrash that I think moves this notion, as is mentioned in the Torah and is explicated a little in the Rambam, just a little bit further. So the midrash I'm sharing with you is the Yalkut Shimoni, and the Yalkut Shimoni describes a conversation that happened between two great Torah sages. And you may remember that twice a year, both on Tisha B'Av and Yom Kippur, we read a kinah that describes the execution of 10 of the great sages of Israel who fell, who died as part during the Hadrianic persecutions at part 133 in the Common Era. So in the Yalkut Shimoni, on this Parshat Mishpatim, the Yalkut Shimoni describes as Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel and Rabbi Yishmael were being led by the Romans to their execution. And Rabban Shimon turns to Rabbi Yishmael and he wonders aloud, like, why is this happening to me? Why am I being punished? Which, by the way, is a classic rabbinic perspective. Like, nothing is random in life. And I've said that before. Nothing is random. So if nothing is random, that means everything has meaning and purpose. So Rabban Shimon is wondering, so why is this happening to me? It's a legit question. So Rabbi Yishmael answers Rabban Shimon, and he says, I'm reading the English just to save time. Hope that's okay. Has it ever happened that a person came to you for judgment or with a question, and you made him wait until you finished drinking was in your cup, putting on your shoes, or wrapping yourself in a cloak? So Rabbi Yishmael is listening to what Rabban Shimon Gamliel's question. He doesn't disagree that there's a reason, and he wonders what could be the reason that such a great Torah sage would be worthy of the death penalty. I mean, by the Romans. And so Rabbi Yishmael says, maybe what you did is, what did you do? Just again, listen to the examples that he gives. Maybe somebody came to your house and needed a handout, and you were just finishing your tea or whatever, and you made that person wait till you finished drinking the tea. Or maybe you're putting on your shoes and you made him wait until you tied your shoelaces. Or you're putting on your coat and just, can you wait a second? I'm just putting on my coat. I'll be with you in 1 second. And the Torah says, in the pasuk that we just said, we're not allowed to oppress somebody who, in the Torah's case, of course, was the almanah and the yatom. But oppression, according to Rabbi Yishmael, seems to now take on a little bit of a broader context. So whereas the pasuk in our parsha is talking specifically about an almanan yatom, Rabbi Yishmael is wondering whether Rabban Shimon, in fact, might have made someone else, not necessarily a yatom and not necessarily an almanah, maybe somebody else who came to your door and needed your help. And you just kept them waiting, not for a long time, not that you brushed them off and said, you know what, don't bother me. You said, I'll be with you, but I'll be with you in a couple of minutes. Maybe that brush off for a couple of minutes, says Rabbi Shmuel, maybe that's what you did, which is deserving of the fate that you're getting. So the story, as is mentioned in the Yalkut Shimoni, may be in fact noteworthy because of lo ta'anu, the idea of not oppressing, of not making one suffer. It doesn't just apply to orphans, and it just doesn't apply to widows. Maybe, says Rabbi Ishmael, that we are liable for punishment not only if we cause distress to the vulnerable and fragile members of society, but even if we fail to respond promptly to a person coming to us for help. Well, that's tough. That's tough. And I'm going to say one other thing. Sometimes we're not comfortable when people come to us asking us for help. We're not. Many of us are not. I shouldn't make that as a generalization. Some of us are not. We're not comfortable when someone comes knocking on our door. I'm not sure they come as frequently now as they did before COVID. Or even when somebody comes into the shul and asks them for a handout. And I know that maybe there's some of us who say, we'd rather not have to face this guy, so we're just going to leave shul quickly, turn around, and we're going to say no. Or maybe if somebody's knocking at my door, and I don't mean this is a safety issue, and I understand why you don't open up your door tonight because of that. But sometimes we don't open up the door because we don't want to have to deal with this person. Not because I'm fearing for my safety, but it's better not to. Is the Torah, or is this Midrash at least, in the Yalkut Shimoni, urging us to consider a different perspective? That if we have the opportunity to help, we have the means to help, and we're withholding that help, maybe that's really not help. Maybe it's not. Rabbi Ishmael thought that Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, one of the great Torah sages, who you would imagine is on such a high level, if even something as simple as telling a person, wait till I finish my drink, is inappropriate, so I'm not on such a high level. I know, and I won't be ever. But maybe I need to learn a lesson and say, maybe I too I'm guilty a little bit of not responding quickly enough, openly enough, fast enough to help somebody. Do we really appreciate the suffering that other people are going through? And sometimes the suffering is not so obvious to us because people don't want to admit to it. If somebody already is coming, and prepared to ask for help, maybe we need to be a little bit more generous in saying, of course we'll help you, and we're going to help you as soon as we can. Not when we're available, but as soon as we can. Something to think about, and let's go on a little bit in our question. Staying with Perek Beit, just going on a little bit more in the Parsha, I want to turn to Pasuk Lamed, which is Pasuk 30. And here's the Pasuk. The Anshe Kodesh Tihiyun Li, Uvasar Basadeh Trefa Lo Tochelu La Kelev Tashlichun Oto. I'll read the explanation. Anshe Kodesh Tihiyun Li, people of holiness shall you be to me, and you shall not eat the flesh of an animal that was torn in the field. Uvasar Basadeh Trefa Lo Tochelu. I'm sure most people know what the word treif means, trefa, right? But in this context, trefa means what? The body of a dead animal that was killed by a predator. You can't take, it's not kosher, even if the animal itself is a kosher animal, but that's how it died. It died at the hands of some sort of predator. Don't touch it. You can't eat, not don't touch it. You can't eat it, but what should you do? To the dog shall you throw it. That animal, the meat of that animal, now should be considered a meat for food for the dogs, but it's not food for you. Okay, let's see if we can understand this. Okay. When considering this pasuk, so why is the Torah introducing the prohibition, the Isser of Treifa, with the admonition of Anshe Kodesh? You got to be holy. Okay. If you want to teach me about kashrus, teach me about kashrus. But the idea of Anshe Kodesh and Treifa don't automatically fit together. There's obviously a reason, otherwise the Torah would not have juxtaposed these two ideas in one pasuk. But what is the reason for that juxtaposition? What's that bridge? What's the idea behind this? So Moshe ben Nachman, the Ramban, on this pasuk, explains that treifa meat, like other meat which is asur, which is prohibited, has a contaminating effect on a person's neshama. So that may be a new idea for some. That the food that we eat can be metamtem et alei. The food that we eat, while it is essentially a food for the biological needs of the body, but our biological needs are not completely distinct and separate from our neshama needs. And certain foods, asur foods that we ingest in our body, is not just a biological, physiological activity. There is an element of that ingestion, of that eating, that actually affects our neshama and taints our neshama in a certain way, has an effect on our soul. This Isser, this prohibition, serves to preserve our potential for Kedusha, for holiness. It's because Hashem wants us to be Anshe Kodesh that he requires that we move away from, we distance ourselves from certain forbidden foods, such as treifa meat, which may hamper our ability to reach the level of holiness that Hashem has in mind for us. That's one possibility. That's definitely a possibility that is mentioned. That's the Ramban. The Ramban. You know, the food the old adage, which maybe is a modern adage, you are what you eat, really has a source maybe in Chumash. If that's the case, we don't want to be treif people. We want to be Anshe Kodesh. So Anshe Kodesh should be eating certain types of food. Food that's just lying dead, carcass in the field, but, torn apart by a predator, that's not appropriate for Anshe Kodesh. It's not for us. It's not for us. We hold ourselves to a higher standard. But let me suggest something else. Maybe looking at the word Kedusha itself and digging a little deeper, pulling back the curtain to understand what it might mean. So the prohibition of treifa, as it's presented by the Torah in this pasuk, it's important to understand the context. So what's the context? The context is basar basadeh treifa. So this is meat, as it were, of an animal that had fallen prey, as we've said now several times, to predators and now lies in the field. So the image that's sort of conjuring up for us is of a person who's walking in a field and chances upon a carcass, which means, hey, this is where I got meat. I got a couple of steaks right here. This is amazing. This is awesome. Meaning, wow, I don't have to go to the meat's right here. Let me just, I'll take some steaks home for the kids. We'll throw it on the barbecue. It's amazing. It's like it just fell in my lap. That's amazing. But the Torah commands us not to help ourselves to this meat, which happens to be lying around in the field, because this manner of consumption of the meat is reserved for dogs, for animals. It's not reserved for us. It's not for us. Anshe Kodesh, that's us, don't eat haphazardly. We don't eat haphazardly on impulse, as an instinctive response to the sight of available food. We are to eat, however, as you know, in a very structured manner. And there's a very disciplined process of preparation that we're to follow. So basar basadeh, it just happens to be there. That's not discipline. That's, oh my God, it just happened to fall in my lap. That's not the way we eat. We prepare. That's not preparing. So the verb, or the shorish kuf dalet shin, anshe kodesh, kuf dalet shin, is actually sometimes used in the context of preparation. And we found it in this week's Parsha, or last week's Parsha. V'kidashtam hayom machar. That was last week's Parsha. When Hashem says to Moshe, I want you to go to Bnei Israel, I want you to tell them to get ready for Matan Torah, the word chosen by Hashem to tell them to get v'kidashtam hayom machar. So one possible meaning of Kedusha is this careful planning, this careful preparation, acting in a very thought out, calculated, measured, disciplined, rational way, as opposed to spontaneously or impulsively. And this is likely the meaning of, if you think about it, when a man and a wife get engaged, the halachic word for it is, as you know, kiddushin, which the Chachamim made up in reference to the act of betrothal. That's what an engagement is. It's kiddushin. So the Rambam, in his opening comments to Hilchot Isha, the laws that govern how a man and a woman ultimately commit to each other and become legally man and wife, those halachot, he describes how the institution of kiddushin is intended to introduce a very formal process of preparation to the relationship between a man and a woman. So before Matan Torah, he writes, none of this existed. Before Matan Torah, before the laws that govern so much of our lives was made known to us through revelation in Parshat Mishpatim and all the other examples, before Matan Torah, a man and a woman would meet, decide to engage in intimate relations, and commit the act of having sexual relationship without any formal structure or marriage. That's how our framework. That's how it started. That's how it started. Obviously, devoid of that element called kiddushin, that act of preparation, of forethought, of deliberate, measured work to get ready for it. So the process of kiddushin lends structure to a relationship by borrowing from the formal and technical. And so, according to this, maybe that's what we're really being asked to. We're being asked to make sure that in the conduct of our lives, even as it applies to the very physical act of eating, we still have to understand that the role of preparation and discipline plays a very important role. We need to know that that's who we are. We are Anshe Kodesh. And there is great sanctity that our religion, not only the Torah, but Chazal, is great sanctity that is attributed to acts of preparation. That when you think about it, the things that we do that are important, you have to pause and think about it. The Mishnah tells us in the time of the Tanaim, how did people go to Daven? Well, Daven, quickly, got to get the shul. It's now, I got to get there, got to Chapa Shemona Esrei. The Hasidim HaRishonim, the great pious ones, they used to actually sit down for an hour before davening. Now, I know that people don't all have an hour. I get it. But think about all the things that we do, the little things that we do, that were intended to teach us about the notion of the sanctity of preparation. When you daven Shemona Esrei, how do you start Shemona Esrei? The very first choreographed piece, what is it? You take 3 steps back. Now, why is it that I'm taking 3 steps back? The point of taking 3 steps back and taking 3 steps forward is to make me realize that I'm now about to enter into the presence of the Melech Malchei HaMelechim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And when you enter into Hashem's presence, you just don't rush in. You think a minute, you prepare yourself. Those 3 steps back are considered to be an act of preparation. That's exactly it. In the menorah, in the Beit HaMikdash, the menorah, which, by the way, I don't know whether you have this image, maybe some have an image of menorah being a really, really tall sort of structure. It wasn't. The menorah in the Beit HaMikdash was not tall at all. It was like you could reach it and light it without doing anything. But the Torah tells us that they had to make 3 steps. The Kohen who lit the menorah had to stand on, he had to climb 3 steps in order to do that. And climbing the 3 steps was not because he couldn't reach the candles. That's not the case. So why make the Kohen climb 3 steps? Because climbing 3 steps is an act of preparation. That's what we do. And we prepare for Shabbos. All the things that we do in our lives indicate that there's a sanctity to preparation. And we should not think that the religious rituals that we do are less important than so many other things. And I've said before, you buy tickets to go see some play. So you may want to listen to the music beforehand because you like to be ready. You're going to read the playbill or you're going to read a review before you go. All of those things. Why? Why do you do those things? To enhance your experience when you go. I'm buying the tickets. I want to go and have a good time. If I'm going to prepare myself to a play, to a movie, to a concert, then certainly preparing myself for my meeting, my encounter with Ribono Shel Olam could surely be worth some minutes, not even hours, some minutes of preparation. So that's what I wanted to share with you. Okay, let's go on. I'm going to jump now to Parshat Gimel. And there's lots of mitzvah here, and obviously you can see that I'm just picking and choosing. Although we could do this, we could have a whole year's course just going through a whole year's course in any parsha, but Parshat Mishpatim particularly because of the many mitzvah here. Parshat Gimel Pasuk Beis. Here is the pasuk. Lo tihiyeh acharei rabim liraot. Velo ta'aneh al riv lintot acharei rabim lahatot. I'll read it in English. Do not be a follower of the majority for evil. Lo tiyeh acharei rabim liraot. Do not be a follower of the majority for evil. And do not respond to a grievance by yielding to the majority to pervert the law. Lo ta'aneh al riv lintot acharei rabim lahatot. I'll read that again. And do not respond to a grievance by yielding to the majority. The word for grievance in the Chumash is riv. Riv is resh, yud, veit. But if you look at it in the pasuk, it's missing the yud. Lo ta'aneh al riv does not have the yud. Lo ta'aneh al riv is resh, veit with the chirik. That vowel under the resh. Now, keeping in mind that there are no vowels, there's no dots, there's no vowels in Sefer Torah, the letters resh, veit could be vocalized, pronounced not as riv, but as rav, which would mean lo ta'aneh al rav. And if we take a look at Rashi, in fact, Rashi is aware of this, and he says the following: She'ein cholkin al mufla shebeveit din. What does that mean? So Rashi is aware of the fact that the Torah specifically chose to write the word read, grievance, without the yud, making it possible to read the word without the yud as rav. And Rashi says from this pasuk, we learn a halacha. What's the halacha? Again, she'ein cholkin al mufla shebeveiti. That you are not allowed to disagree or to argue with an extraordinary Torah scholar in the Beit Din. If there's somebody who is a gadol hador, you do not have the right to argue. So, I mean, just imagine in his time of Moshe Feinstein, 1986, he passed away, or other gadolim. You're going to go and he's sitting and there's a conversation and the gadol hador says something, and I have in my mind an idea. Do you really think I'm going to say, I actually think my idea is better than yours? Well, no, it's the gadol hador. I can't talk. So that's exactly what this is. Lo ta'aneh al riv. Don't follow the majority in a grievance, which is and follow to bad decision. But also lo ta'aneh al rav. And so Rashi says you're not allowed to argue with the mufla, the gadol hador. Lefichach matchilin b'dinei nefashot min hatzad. Liktanim shebahen she'olim tchila she'omru et da'atam. And so Rashi tells us a little bit based on the Gemara Sanhedrin how the Sanhedrin actually works. So now there's a capital case. Someone's life is at stake. This person has been accused of a crime of Avirah, for which the Torah says the possible punishment is the death penalty. So now that the Sanhedrin is sitting and they have to discuss this. So they're all sitting around and somebody has to go first. So you have the gadol hador sitting amongst the Zakanim in the Sanhedrin. Who should go first? Well, since I know this halacha, what's the Gemara say? You should have the person who is least experienced, as least knowledgeable, go first. Why? Because if we start with the mufla, we start with the gadol hador, nobody else can say anything. That's the end of the discussion. One person speaks and over. But that's not the way the Torah wants us to have our conversations. The Torah wants us to explore every avenue, every idea. So while this halacha tries to protect and preserve and make sure we provide the proper honor and kavod and dignity and deference to the mufla, the gadol hador, it's not looking to supplant the process of finding the truth. So start with the least experienced. Let him say his piece first. Maybe he has something that nobody thought of possibly. But you can't get to that point if you start with the mufla. Okay. So I'm going to now share a story which you all probably know, and it's one of the stories that is the only one of the few stories actually allowed to learn on Tisha B'Av, because on Tisha B'Av there's a prohibition to learning Torah. I'm talking about the famous Gemara Masechet Gittin, the story of Kamsa Bar Kamsa. I'm not going to tell the whole story. I'm assuming many of you, all of you know it. So the invitation was extended to the wrong person, who was the enemy of the party host. The enemy of the party host ends up being invited because his name sounds very similar to his close friend. He comes up, the host sees him, says, "Get out of here, I don't want you here." The man who was invited, who's the enemy apparently of the host, is so embarrassed, he promises to pay the entire catering bill. That's it. Don't embarrass me in front of everybody. Please don't embarrass me. Just let me stay. So the story, as you know, no such thing. And he gets kicked out of the house. And all the Chachamim, this was one of the parties for the ages, all the leading rabbis are sitting there, and nobody got up to say a thing. Nobody got up to say a thing. So the guy leaving, of course, is just mortified. He's devastated. And this leads to him, I guess, thinking about how to get vengeance. And one thing leads to the other. And this happens at the time where the Roman rulership was still involved, and they hadn't yet destroyed the Beit Mikdash. Rome is still present in Israel, and so one thing leads to the other, and word gets to the Roman prelate that the Jews are planning a revolt based on what this guy is saying, because he wants to get back at everybody. The rabbis don't care enough about him, he doesn't care about him. So there's a revolt. How do you know there's a revolt? He says, "I'm telling you they're planning a revolt, and I can tell you what to do to prove that they're going to the revolt." What is it? "So why don't you bring the korban?" This man says to the non-Jewish Romans, "Bring the korban to the Beit Mikdash and see what happens." Now you have to remember that a non-Jew bringing a korban to the Beit Mikdash was not prohibited. Entirely okay. It happened, but this man looking to seek vengeance figured out what's going to happen. So what he did when no one was looking, he put the slightest, almost imperceptible blemish to the animal, knowing, of course, that a blemished animal was forbidden to be put on the altar, and knowing that the rabbis in charge of the Kohanim, in charge of the altar, the Mizbeach, would check the animal, would find the blemish, would not let the animal be sacrificed, at which point it would be proof that there's a revolt. You see, they don't want you, they're turning against you, no more korbanot. And that would have been the beginning of some sort of a vengeful punishment on the part of the Roman government. Okay? So this is what happened. Gemara tells us in the second Gittin, they brought the animal, and absolutely the Romans brought it, and they found, the Kohanim found it. Now, the reason that the Chachamim were wondering what to do was because they had a suspicion. They had a suspicion that what? A suspicion that this is a ploy. And they realized that there's something happening here. So what should they do? Should they sacrifice the animal because of what might happen if they don't sacrifice? Or maybe another idea is, let's kill the guy. Then forget the animal, let's kill him, and maybe that'll make the problem go away, because then he won't have a chance to prove his point. So they went to, Gemara tells us, they went to Zechariah ben Avkulas, who was a leading rabbi. And Rav Zechariah ben Avkulas said, well, we can't sacrifice the animal, because if we sacrifice the animal, people will think that sacrificing animals and blemishes is mutter. And we can't kill the other guy, because if we kill the other guy, they may think that anybody who brings a moon, brings an animal that's a blemish, is guilty of the death penalty. But that's not true. So Rav Zechariah ben Avkulas wasn't exactly sure what to do, and he didn't want to paskin the shayla. He didn't want to paskin. He didn't want to paskin. Of course, that his lack of paskining led to the Romans wondering what was going on, and then ultimately the destruction of the Beit Mikdash. Okay, and just before this Gemara ends, we have Rabbi Yochanan making the final statement. Anvatanuto shel Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkulas echriva et beitenu v'sarfa et hechalenu v'glitanu me'artzei. Says Rabbi Yochanan about Zechariah ben Avkulas, his modesty was the cause of the destruction of the temple, of the burning of the Beit Hamikdash and the Heichal, and of our being dispersed among the nations. So that's such a bold statement. So what did this guy do that was so terrible? Listen to the Vilna Gaon's understanding of the Gemara. And again, this is based on lo ta'aneh al Rav. You're not allowed to argue. So remember we said that how does the Sanhedrin start? Who should be the first person to speak? Should it be the Gadol Ador? No, because it's the Gadol Ador, then nobody else can say anything. Let it start with the least experience. So I'm going to read from the explanation of the Vilna Gaon. Rav Zechariah ben Avkulus mi rov anvatanuto. Rav Zechariah, because he was so intensely modest, lo hikir batzmo, he didn't understand his relationship to the other chachamim. He didn't understand that he's a gadol shebedayanim. He didn't realize that he's the gadol. Oh, I'm so modest. He didn't get it. V'savar shua katan shebekulam. He thought, well, I'm the least knowledgeable. So if I'm the least knowledgeable, who should be the first person to render an opinion? Me. And so he rendered the opinion. But everybody else recognized him as being the Gadol Ador. So he thought of himself as being what? As being a modest person. I have no skill. Oh my God, I'm a nobody. I'll go first. Everybody else is looking at him and saying, oh my God, the Gadol Ador just paskin. So now we can't say anything because in Israel, the right, the Torah tells us you can't argue with the Gadol Ador. That's what the Gemara says. The Kishi Amruda, no, 1 second. Lezotik dim dvarav l'divrem. Therefore, he wanted to be the first one to speak. The chivada ato shelo yakrivu korban. And he gave his opinion. No, you shouldn't bring the korban. Mishum shelo yamru balei mumin karevin al gabei mizbech. He said, you know what? I'm thinking about it. No, don't give the korban because once you give the korban, everybody's going to say, oh, you can bring animals which are blemished on the mizbech. No, can't bring it. Ulam kasher bemet hayahu gadol shebedayanim. Even though he truly was the greatest one of the Dayanim. Read, but it's really Rav. They couldn't say anything. And they recognized that his thinking was flawed. It wasn't correct. He schemed with Rav. They agreed to him. And they agreed not to bring the korban. And that is why Rabbi Yochanan said his modesty destroyed everything. So let me end with what's modesty? According to this definition, what's modesty? And I think I've said this before. It's an amazing answer, though. Modesty is not self-effacement, where you don't recognize your talents. That's not what modesty means. Modesty means understanding the talents and gifts that God gave you, not minimizing them, accepting them, using them, but when you use them, attribute them to God. It's not about you. It's not that, I worked so hard, I got the best degree, I'm the smartest lawyer, I know everything, I discovered, I paid, I built. Okay, you might have done true. Maybe you got the highest marks in your class, okay. But the way in which you present that is, God gave me the wisdom to be the best I could be in class. Everything I've accomplished because God has made it possible for me to be the best version of myself. Hashem has made it possible. According to what Rabbi Yochanan says, Rabbi Zechariah ben Avkulus should have understood that he was a Gadol Ador. Being modest doesn't mean so effacing that you don't recognize your strengths. And that's why he was, according to Vilna Gaon, that's why he was held accountable. And that's why Rabbi Yochanan said, it was him that destroyed the Beis HaMikdash. It was him that made our country burn. It was him that sent us into Galus. Why? Because he didn't really want it. His sense of modesty was misplaced. Here at Sunday, all of us have an understanding of the strengths God gave us, and each one of us has our strengths. And whatever area it is, recognize your strength, embrace your strength, whether it's musical, medical, knowledge, dancing, cooking, being a spouse, being a mother, being a grandparent, whatever your strength is, whatever area it is, you have it because Hashem gave it to you. And that's the recognition that Hashem wants. Don't hide it, just give Hashem the attribution that he deserves. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Simcha.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Beautiful, beautiful message, Rabbi.
Thank you. Let me just see if we can shut off the.
Thank you.
There we go.
Thank you, Rabbi.
You're very welcome. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for joining. Thank you.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
I hope it is believable. I hope it is believable, not unbelievable.
It is.
There we
You're
go.
so right. I have to tell you, so many times, sometimes I felt like looking around, who gave me that thought? And I realized that came from high above.
Yes.
That's
So many times. It's almost like somebody's next to me and guiding me. And I know, I agree with you 100%. Yes.
Yeah.
Good.
Thank you. Thank you.
Rabbi,
9 o'clock.
Rabbi,
Yeah, Paul, yes.
I love you dearly, but I'd like to take issue with two things you said tonight.
Anybody else want to speak or? Go ahead, Paul. I'm teasing.
The first thing you said when you were talking about people coming to you for money and we can do more than we have.
Yeah.
I'm not prepared to open my door at 10 o'clock at night to someone banging on my door. Times are different today than they were yesterday.
I agree. I said this.
There are agencies which look after people. People should know the proper routes for do it. Walking down the street, down Young Street, a guy's panhandling for money. I tell the guy I will take him in and buy him a sandwich. He says, no, he doesn't want a sandwich. He'd rather have the money. I look him square in the eye and he says, because you're going to out and buy booze, aren't you? And he says, yes. You know what? Times are different these days. We have to do it the right way to get the right support for the people who need the support.
I hear what you're saying, Paul, and I'm not questioning the late night knocking at the door. I wouldn't want my wife to open up the door. And there have been times that I have not opened up my door because I thought the person's coming at a ridiculous hour. You don't come to somebody's house at 11 o'clock at night. That's true. But I've also seen in a shul that both of us are familiar with, people coming not at 11 o'clock, they're coming at davening time and they're asking for money. And people saying, leave me alone. Come at another time. Well, that's when the guy can come. That's what they're here for. So there's got to be some sort of balance. And I get that. The striking that balance, Paul, sometimes is difficult. And I'm concerned that people are brushing it off too quickly and saying, you didn't come at the right time, therefore I don't have an obligation to help. And I get the point that's being made, but sometimes I think we're too quick to dismiss our obligation because the protocol is what's at stake here. So I'm not questioning why you're saying it because I totally get it, but I just am trying to, I guess, raise the awareness that some other circumstances may call upon us to be a little bit more open to helping.
Okay, and the second point I want to make, and it's something to do with Shiur Shemayim, is preparation. I just went through this last Shabbos. We started davening in the afternoon at 5:10. The doors were locked until 5 o'clock. Security guy at the front door told me that he's not paid to open the door before 5 o'clock. 10 minutes is not long enough for me to get in and get in the right mood to pray. It's just not long enough. I took it up with the management of the shul, and I want you to know that they're now considering opening the doors earlier. But people don't come to services. They come late to services. They come in 5-10 minutes late. There are people who come every single service. They come late. And with all due respect to our beloved clergy, some of the clergy come late every day for services too. Preparation is important. We have to be there and get in the right mood to reach out to Hashem, so we will be able to pray properly. And that's a pet peeve of mine that I'm going to go to the wall for.
Okay, listen, I'm all for preparation, but I will take issue with one thing, Paul. I don't know what goes on in people's lives. I don't know what goes on behind people's closed doors. And people walk into shul late. I'm going to say to you, and don't be upset with me, I think we have to be very careful before we judge them, because we don't know what led to that lateness. Sometimes, yes, the lateness is because of not being mindful of the time, but sometimes that lateness may be because of something totally proper and something we're not aware of. So I don't want to be judged quickly by other people. So I think I have to be careful not to judge others quickly as well, because nobody knows what's going on in my life, and I don't know what's going on in theirs.
Right, but I'm saying there are individuals that I do know what's going on in their life, and I do know that they just kretzer hard, they come in late, just to come in late
Right.
every.
Look, we all have areas that we need to work on, 100%, all of us, every single.
So I'm reinforcing your idea of
appreciate it.
preparation.
I appreciate it. I appreciate it.
Preparation's important.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, everybody.
Good night, Rabbi. Thank you very
I
much.
value everybody's coming to Shiur. Thank you. It means a lot to me. I hope you're leaving with a couple of ideas you can share
Yeah.
with your family or your
Thank you.
Shabbos table.
It's an
For sure.
honor.
For
It's an
sure.
honor. Thank you.
Thank you, Simcha. Thank Nelly for us, okay? You and
Thank you.
long life and good health. Good night, my friends. Be well.
Good night, Rabbi. Good night.